4th and 2 from the Miami Dolphins 46, trailing 10-6. By the way, the only thing that was appealing and sexy about that game was the weather. Quote, we're executing for 60 minutes. I can't even say it without laughing. I'm sorry. We're executing for 60 minutes to try and win. We felt it was necessary to try and get Riley Dixon, who is the punter, by the way, involved early, as we knew he was going to be big for us this week. That quote alone, he should be fired. He should be fired. I just, and, the funny thing is, I'm pretty sure that the quote itself isn't tongue in cheek, because if you follow the guy that tweeted it, he does a lot of tongue in cheek quotes, right? But I wouldn't put it past Joe Judge. It's a sarcastic tweet, but it's just, again, think about it. Wes is basically saying that's the coach's thought process, which to me is still grounds for him being fired. Did he come out and actually say those words? No. But it's bad. I mean, it's so bad I got to bring in Lloyd Vance and see. Not that he said it, but the fact that he's thinking it. It's pretty bad there with the Giants, is it not?
Yeah, Q, I know Mike Glennon was starting the game, but they have to try harder to win it. And it was there for the taking. I know Miami's stringing all these wins together on a 5 straight winning game streak, but it just seems like they're just being the kind of downtrodden teams right now.
Yeah, I mean, what do they do at the end of the year, though?
Well, Joe Judge is going to be on the table. They've already kind of got their scapegoat, Jason Garrett. He's out the door, and they have a new play caller, and next thing to go probably is Gettleman. But Joe Judge, he's on a 3-year contract in year 2, and the team just does not seem to have that spark around him. So yeah, decisions will be on the table in terms of him as well as Daniel Jones, what they do with him.
Yeah, it's crazy because it seems every coach now all of a sudden is having funny quotes. I heard McDermott last night. Let's not give more credit than we need to give Bill Belichick in this one. Quarterback goes 2 for 3 for 19 yards, and they run for 211 yards. I mean, yeah, give him credit because he realized we're just going to run the ball down your throat, and there's nothing you can do about it.
They couldn't do anything about it. They ran 46 times for 222 yards. That long touchdown by Harris, 60-some yards. And you just saw how they controlled the line of scrimmage, the Patriots. And they said, you know what? We're going to make sure Mac Jones doesn't make any mistakes. We're going to ride the win when we have it, and then our defense is going to be attacking. So, the Bills, my team, to go to the Super Bowl and win it, they look like they're in trouble because other than Josh Allen and Diggs, they do not have any playmakers on offense. And then defensively, you saw that they just cannot stop the run.
Lloyd, they're done. They're shot. They're done. They're not. For everyone that jumped on the Allen bandwagon, and myself included, I think he's a hell of a quarterback. And, we were talking about MVP and maybe making a play for him, MVP of the NFL this year. And that's not to say he doesn't have a little run left in him with Buffalo this season. I mean, if you look at his numbers as a whole, they've been pretty good. I mean, over 3,200 yards, close to 30 touchdowns, 10 picks, but not the type of explosion we saw last year with this offense. And I know they're kind of a banged-up team, but to your point, I don't see anyone right now beating Kansas City. I think Kansas City's peaking at the right time.
Kansas City does look like a team putting the wins together, and this week they're not going to get the style points. Buffalo, everybody's still kind of in the mix with their records and that, but Buffalo has a huge game at Tampa Bay this week. We'll see what they can do. And you're right, when you look at Kansas City, their best efforts out there, they're getting people healthy. Their defense is coming along, guys like Frank Clark and Ingram coming off the edge, and Chris Jones in the middle pushing the pocket. Dan Sorensen had that big pick 6 in the game, and they're going to play the Raiders now this week, a team they've notoriously moved the football up and down the field on. So you're right, Kansas City is a very dangerous team right now.
Yeah, and you're talking about the team they have to play in the Raiders that just lost to Washington. I mean, is there a hotter team, right? When we talk about the NFC right now, than what Washington's doing, and they go on the road. They have a long drive by Heineke. They win it on the road against the Raiders. They won 4 straight now. They're playing really good football. I mean, if anything, they're probably thinking to themselves, "The heck with a wild card. We want to try to go out and win the division."
And Washington is going to have that opportunity. We talked about last week about all these divisional games coming up for them. It starts this week. They play Dallas, then they're at Philadelphia, then at Dallas, Philadelphia, and then at the Giants to close the season. So all these divisional games, you're right, they could possibly catch the Cowboys. The Cowboys got the win on Thursday night, another game that was not that great. But when I look at Washington, they're a team that just has that momentum behind them. You know, Heineke is an efficient guy. He's not going to wow you in terms of putting up big numbers, but he had 196 yards, 2 touchdowns. The kicker, Johnson, made that big 40-yarder to win the game. And you can't say enough about this defense and guys like Cole Holcomb, who had 10 sacks. So been a lot of big names on that defense now, but Washington is definitely stringing the wins together.
Yeah, the Eagles got the win with the backup in Minshew. I'm not going to go crazy. I mean, Jalen Hurts is going to be the starter going forward. But I'll say this. Everything kind of broke for the Philadelphia Eagles, right? They get the win against the Jets. They turn around. Detroit upsets Minnesota. We'll get to that in a minute. Chicago loses. Atlanta loses. The Saints lose. Minnesota loses. San Francisco loses. So a couple of nice things breaking if you're an Eagles fan.
Yeah, the Eagles, you're right. Everything came together for them. At one point, they were the number 7 seed, and then it kind of receded at the end of the day. But they have their bye. Then they play Washington, which would be a big game. The Giants at Washington, and then they finish with Dallas. So the Eagles, I started getting all my regular people tweeting me that, it's Minshew mania time and all this. But I think they were playing a downtrodden Jets team, and he took advantage of them. It was good to see Goddard get involved. He had those 2 touchdowns in the game, and they just beat up on the Jets, who were 3 for 9 on third down. So another game where the Eagles rushed for 200 yards. But you'd like to see them get a quality win against a team that's not playing a backup-type quarterback at this point.
Yeah, but you know this as well as I do, right? You play the hand that's been dealt. And we know this, and I say it tongue-in-cheek, they're not going to apologize for that. You think the Chargers are going to apologize Sunday when Jake from State Farm's out there for the Giants and they wax them by 35?
No team's going to do that. And you want to put up the big numbers when you have that opportunity out there. So we'll see how it goes. And, it's an opportunity for the Eagles to step forward. And you're right. They're going to sit back on their bye week and see what they can do. So, we'll see if they're able to catch the Cowboys. But I still think the Cowboys, even though Zeke's beat up, they're the team to beat in the NFC East.
What do you make of the Ravens going for it against the Steelers? Now, I said that I'm not going to question Harbaugh. They were banged up. They had issues in the secondary. You're on the road. It's a division rival. You know what? Let's just try to get out of here with a win, not worry about going into overtime. It was a great play design. They just didn't execute it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And with Humphrey getting hurt and he's probably done for the year with that pec injury, Harbaugh just believed that his team had the momentum, and they did. The Steelers were allowing them to move the ball up and down the field. With the Steelers, to be quite frank, they had some poor tackling out there. Yes, they got a lot of hits on Lamar, and Watt had 3 enhanced sacks, 7 sacks total. But on those running plays, they were not stopping Freeman. He was getting big chunks on third down, and you're right, at the goal line, Lamar wasn't the best throw. He put it on Andrews' hand, and maybe he could tip it to himself, but it was unfortunate for them. And the Steelers at 6-5-1, they still have some life in them.
Yeah, no doubt they do, and that was a real big win by Pittsburgh. Rams got back on track. We've been talking about them over the last several weeks. Mike Zimmer in Minnesota, whether people think right now he can still coach, I mean, that's as bad as a loss, man. You got that quarterback going down the length of the field against you, and your defense is playing relaxed coverage, prevent defense, and then you rush 3 the last play of the game, and your DBs or corners drop back in the coverage 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. I mean, That's a fireball fence, man.
And Q, this is a guy we talked about at the beginning of the year that he was on the hot seat with Fangio and Nagy. And I think Mike Zimmer, it's just his time's done with Minnesota. He's a defensive-minded coach, as you're saying, and he's been there a number of years, and they just have not gotten it done. So Red McCombs, the owner, will probably be looking at Zimmer. He'll probably be looking at Rick Spielman, the GM that's been there a long time, and possibly looking at Kirk Cousins to make some changes. So this is another team where they definitely need to look in the mirror. And you're right, Jared Goff, he's 75 yards away with 1:50 on the clock, and they just allowed him to hit plays, short plays, get out of bounds, and they just had no urgency about themselves. And then at the goal line, they didn't defend the goal line, and then they get the big winner. So, it's a great win for Detroit. You don't want to see a team be winless, but very bad loss for the Vikings, and they only blitzed once that whole time in that entire drive.
What do you make of the Colts now? All of a sudden, right, above 500, above water. Wentz's numbers were pedestrian. They can run the football. Obviously, Taylor's having a monster year. Another 2 against the Texans. They blank them 31-0. Right now, the Colts are 7-6. They can win on the road a little bit. And you look at their schedule coming up. If they're going to get in the playoffs, they're going to have to earn it because they've got New England, the Cardinals, the Raiders, and then they close against a bad Jag team.
Yeah, and they will have their opportunities. They have a big bye this week to try to figure things out. But you're right. As Taylor goes, this team's going to go 32 rushes for 143 yards. He had 2 touchdowns in the game. But you're right. You got to beat the Texans, and that's what they did. They shut them out. But that's not going to impress anybody. And the way Wentz is playing, kind of pedestrian, he's got to do better. Now, the big thing for Eagles fans is Wentz is 10 snaps away from the Eagles getting a first-round draft pick of the Colts. So that's a big thing for Eagles fans to look at. But the Colts, if they want to win into the playoffs, they got to earn it. As you said, big game coming up at New England after their bye.
Yeah, and he's going to hit that snap mark, no doubt. Kansas City gets back again to their winning ways. A lot of people wrote them off. I said when they lost to the Titans, I came on the air and said, take a flyer on them to win the AFC West. Now, all of a sudden, they won 5 in a row. They got the Raiders, Chargers, Steelers, Cincy, and Denver coming up. Let's just say they go 3-2. They're going to get to 11 wins, so they're going to be right back in the playoffs and most likely high seeding, and they're going to win the West.
Yeah, and the thing we're talking about Kansas City is they're starting it healthy on defense, and they're getting the guys in the right place, and they're becoming a defensive-minded team, as crazy as that it sounds, because Kelsey did not do a lot in this game. Neither did Tyreek Hill, and they just kind of leaned on their running game, and Pat Mahomes just made a couple plays here and there. Mahomes only threw for 184 yards, no touchdowns, had 1 interception. But I talked about Dan Sorensen earlier. He had that big pick 6, and Teddy Bridgewater is just check down Charlie. They got 2 interceptions on him, and Denver -3 in the game in terms of turnovers. They just can't get it done. They're a team that's kind of going nowhere fast.
Who got the game ball and who's the lackey?
No, we already kind of talked about the game ball went to the Patriots O-line. They were just incredible. Windy situation, that no one was throwing the ball out there. 46 rushes for 222 yards. That's a 4.8 yards per carry, and they also had that 1 touchdown. So Shaq Mason and the guys up front did a great job. So they get my game ball. The lackey obviously has to go to Mike Zimmer. He's supposed to be a defensive-minded coach, and he just allowed Jared Goff to look like John Elway out there.
Man, I would have gave it to Mike Glennon.
Yeah, Mike Glennon was also up there, and also Greg Everett. Don't forget about him. He's the tight end at Seattle. He had a terrible game. He had 2 fumbles, including 1 at the goal line, and he also had an interception that bounced off his hand in the end zone. So very bad game for Seattle tight end, even though they won the game. So a lot of candidates, but I definitely had to give it to Mike Zimmer.
Yeah, we don't talk too much about backups and not re-signing backups, and obviously it was a mistake for the Giants to not re-sign Colt McCoy. They win that game with Colt McCoy probably playing over Glennon and Daniel Jones.
Yeah, Mike Glennon is a guy, he reminds me of Sam Bradford. He's stolen a lot of money over the years. He keeps getting these. I remember when they signed him to be a starter, I think in Chicago, and he's a guy that's just a better clipboard holder. He's a tall, big guy, but he just can't get it done. And the Giants, what an ugly game for them. And then Saquon, only 11 rushes for 35 yards. He just does not seem right. And the Giants kind of limping home this season.
Do you think he's done? Do you think he shot Saquon Barkley?
Well, Q, he's always going to. They're always going to say, "Oh, he's that top 5 pick," but all those injuries and his legs just do not look explosive. Maybe in the off season they can find a way to get him going again. But Q, right now at this point, I have to say, running back's the most physical position out there. You have to say, yeah, he's at the end of his career a little bit.
Wow, I just think when I say he shot, I think he's so afraid to get hit. Like he's had 2 explosive runs. He had one the other day for 16 and one for like 26 against the Eagles. But he's not catching the ball out of the backfield. He's not hitting the hole, and I'm seeing run out of bounds. I just think he's a running back that is afraid to get hit, and maybe, again, maybe he needs to change senior. I don't know how you can give him a contract extension, to be honest, not with his injury history.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, and maybe he's like, I remember Ernest Kleiner leaving Cleveland after he seemed done, and he went to Washington and had a rebirth. So, Saquon has very good hands. Maybe he could be a very productive third down back out there. But if you're talking about an every down back where he's going to block and catch the ball and run between the tackles, that's just not him at this stage in his career.
Wow. I mean, he's still relatively young. Joe Mixon carried it 58 times in 2 weeks. Some running backs just they can't do that. 5:30 on the Tuesday edition of BYP. Rich Quinones here. Half an hour to play with. We'll take you up to 6. Lloyd Vance joining us. Vance's view, as he typically does every Tuesday after the weekend slate of football action. All right, let's go through some of these games. Here's your real nice matchup. 1 o'clock CBS window. Baltimore against Cleveland. Cleveland desperate for a win. Now, they're laying 2.5 at home against the Ravens, coming off that loss, going for 2 late against Pittsburgh. I don't see anything from the Browns that I like. I actually like Baltimore getting the 2.5. More importantly, the hook, if you will. We'll call it 3 against the Browns. What's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Q, this is interesting because visiting teams were 8-6 this week, so Baltimore's going to have the opportunity to go in there and win this game. And I kind of would agree with you because the key is going to be blocking Myles Garrett and the Ravens controlling that edge. So, I think the Ravens will want to make this statement game out there saying they're still the king in the AFC North, and they want to put that bad loss to the Steelers behind them. So I think they go in there, and Lamar Jackson has a big game. Cleveland, we talked about them earlier. Something's amiss there with Baker Mayfield, and they're just not moving the ball effectively. So they'll have Kareem Hunt back out there at full strength. That'll be interesting to watch, but I still think it's Ravens game.
Raiders and the Chiefs. Raiders coming off that loss to Wash. Nice win by the Chiefs. They keep it rolling. They're laying 9.5. That's a big number, man. So 9.5 for Kansas City. 5-2 at home. They're starting to click on all cylinders.
Yeah, and they've had big games against the Raiders in the past, particularly Kelsey and Mahomes. So, 9's a big number. They would have to get to 10, obviously. I think Kansas City can get to 10 because the Raiders are just having difficulty with Derek Carr driving the football down the field. Darren Waller has that bad knee injury, and we haven't seen in the last couple of weeks. He's been throwing a lot of check down to Hunter Renfrow, and Zay Jones got grabbed at the end of that game, but he's just not making a lot of plays. So I'll go with Kansas City to cover that and probably win it by 1 point, put up 10-point deficit.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, when you're looking to bet some of these games, right, I'm not betting the Raiders if Waller's not playing. I'm not betting the Saints if Kamara's not playing. I mean, there are certain teams that you can ill afford to have their star position players out. Falcons and the Panthers, nah. Seattle and Texas, nah. Lions and the Broncos. The only thing I'm going to ask you about the Chargers game right now is they're laying 10.5. The Giants will go to Fromm, and the Chargers got back to their winning ways. That's a really nice win on the road against Cincinnati. I still believe this team has a little bit of a run, but I'm concerned because I'm seeing them give up some big plays in the secondary. I think there's a ton of pressure on Justin Herbert. I would like to see them kind of run the ball, a lot more. Eckler only got 14 touches the other day, and Herbert had to throw it, I think, 36 times. Now, they jumped out quickly on Cincinnati. I think they led that one, 24-13, 24-7 since he came back. But, I would like to see the the Chargers kind of run the ball a little more as we get towards the end of the season, take a little more pressure off Justin Herbert, and they've got some winnable games, man. After the Giants, tough game against the Chiefs, but then they have the Texans, the Broncos, and the Raiders. So they're right there for that playoff spot.
Yes, Q. This is a huge game for the Chargers. They have to have that consistency that we've been waiting for all year, and they can't get complacent. We know that the Giants are coming in, they're kind of limping in, and it's a game they got to take care of business, maybe get an early lead like you were talking about last week, and then go from there. Now, Derwin James is doing a nice job, and Joey Bosa on their defense, so that seems to be coming along. But Herbert's got to make some plays, and you're right. Eckler, you'd like to see him run a little bit harder between the tackles and not just be a catching back. So big game for them, but I think maybe look at the over in this game also with the Chargers.
So you realize the Giants can't score.
I know you're down on the Giants, but you know the Chargers kind of lull you if they get a lead and they kind of relax and they go on an umbrella defense. So maybe Saquon can hit a big play. Maybe some of the receivers come back and you know maybe they can put up a couple.
We would need 30-10 and then a backdoor touchdown late. That gets us over 44.
There you go. So that's the play I'm talking about.
I'm a glass half full kind of guy. 49ers, bad loss against Seattle. They're getting one on the road against Cincinnati.
Yeah, this is a fun one because it's like a playoff elimination type game. Both of these teams, we talk about their quarterbacks are you know, mid-level, but they're trying to make that jump, and both inconsistent rosters. So Seattle has San Francisco's number. They've beaten them 16 out of the last 18 times. So they're going to go into Cincinnati kind of mad, and we'll see which defense really shows up in this one. I kind of think that Joe Burrow is going to make some big plays down the field to Jamar Chase. Joe Mixon, a guy who's grinding it out, and Hubbard and Hendrickson can get after the quarterback. So I think Cincinnati will win this one, and I think the number's kind of low, so I think Cincinnati will cover it.
Tampa Bay's laying 3 at home against Buffalo, so short week for the Bills, even though they were at home. You know, you look at Tampa Bay, and they didn't cover against the Cowboys. They covered against the Falcons. They covered against the Dolphins. They covered against the Bears, and they covered against the Giants. Now they're back at home. They're 5-0. I love Tampa in this spot with 3. I love them.
Yeah, I totally do now too because Tom Brady's just picking it up at this point, and he's a guy that when he smells bloody, he just goes after it. He hit Chris Godwin for 15 catches, 143 yards last week. Gronk had 2 touchdowns, getting the ball to them, and then they just got back with their corners who were hurt earlier this season. So, you know, Buffalo's kind of limping in there, and we talked about their lack of a running game, and it's going to take a total team effort for Buffalo, but I just think Tampa Bay has a better roster, and they do cover that number.
Yeah, listen, I think when we talk about teams that are starting to kind of hit their stride, Kansas City, you know, Tampa Bay, those teams that we talk about. Trying to think. Bears, Packers, not really interesting. You know, the Rams and the Cardinals, I'm surprised this number is 3. I actually thought, believe it or not, it would actually be 1.5, 2, just because, you know, the Rams and the Cardinals play each other tough. I know typically they lose these games to Rams, but they're on the road, and I think it's almost like a recency bias to the Cardinals. I thought the line would be a little lower, give the Rams a little more respect coming off the big win against Jacksonville. I don't believe this line's going to settle in at 3, but I love what Arizona's doing. They're getting all their weapons back. They quietly have put together a really nice year. And let's be honest, you know, the loss against the Panthers was a bad loss. This can easily be an 11-1 team.
Yeah, and now they have Kyler Murray back, and he looked very comfortable this past week in Chicago in the outdoor elements. Now, the interesting thing with the Cardinals is they're 7-0 on the road this year, so they'll be back home, and they're going to be in the Dome, and it's going to be up to the Rams to kind of step up because this Rams team has a good record, 8-4, but they're 6-0 against teams that are sub-500 like Jacksonville. So they put up big numbers against those type of teams. But, you know, Arizona's going to be coming after with Buda Baker and Chandler Jones, the rest of those guys. So I think it's a tough assignment for the Rams because Kyler Murray and D Hop are back, and you're seeing James Conner playing very well at this point. He's running the ball downhill. So I think Arizona covers that number, and I'm not sure about the over, but you probably want to look at that because this game is going to probably be high scoring.
Yeah, we talk about all these other players, these running backs for MVP, and I know Taylor's having a monster year. James Conner has 12 touchdowns already. Like he's really put together a fantastic season. I believe that's a career high. He had 12 when he was with Pittsburgh, and not to mention he's got 2 receiving, so he's got 14 total. So he's just put together a really nice season running and catching the ball out of backfield. You mentioned some of these coaches, and you talked a little bit about Joe Judge. Where do you put Zimmer? Is Zimmer out at the end of the year?
Yeah, right now I would say Zimmer, Matt Nagy, and Fangio, the way Denver's kind of limping home. Those would be 3 of the guys that I have my eye on that they may not make it to they may be gone that Monday after the season. So, it's unfortunate. You don't like to talk about guys losing their job, but Zimmer, we talked about he's been there about 5 years now, and he's supposed to be a defensive coach, and you could see the rosters kind of not listening to him, particularly on defense, other than Harrison Smith. They're not playing real well on defense. So, it's a tough situation for him. But if they need a change in Minnesota.
Yeah, and Johnny Mack brought up the same exact point you did. He said there's no way Zimmer's calling those plays late defensively. The players just aren't listening. And when that's the case and it falls on deaf ears, it's typically the head coach that goes. It's not the player.
Yes. And they have a lot of names on defense. I know Everson Griffith is out, but they still have Barr and the rest of those guys, but they're just not executing the way they need to. We all pointed to Zimmer having that great 2017 season where they lost the Eagles, but that's long past it. And, he's just not getting it done. And let's face it, Stefanski leaving him, that showed a lot. Stefanski definitely hit a lot of things for them and helped that offense out. And Kirk Cousins is a guy who's inconsistent. Jefferson's one of the best young receivers out there. So if they're smart, they'll kind of build their team around those two. But definitely Zimmer's probably going to go. And we talked about Rick Spielman, the general manager. It may be time for him to step away as well.
Let me give you one more that might be a little out of left field. What about Matt Rule? I mean, they just got rid of Joe Brady. They said it was purely football related. They were 3-0. Everyone loved Darnold in the beginning of the year, including myself. They're 5-7. They've dropped what? They've dropped 7 out of their last 9. They don't score at all. The whole Cam Newton. I mean, look, it's just he's shot. He's done as a quarterback. They're probably going to need to go after a quarterback in the free agent market or the draft. I mean, where are you right now with the Carolina Panthers and Matt Rule?
Yeah, Matt Rule, that's an interesting one, too, because they gave him a 7-year contract. So, I know they have David Tepper as Pete Pockets, their new owner down there, but would he really want to pay him like 4 years the rest of that salary? So it's going to be interesting. They definitely got to find a young quarterback. We know Cam is limited at this point. Sam Darnold is not the answer. Christian McCaffrey, another guy who they gave big money to, and he's always hurt, and is he the guy that they need? So a lot of moving parts around Carolina, but I think that they will bring him back at least for one more season. But you're right, he's on a hot seat, and right now it's looking like Joe Brady was the scapegoat.
All right, pal. Great stuff as always. Enjoy the games this weekend and put a little money in the pocket. We'll talk next Tuesday.
All right, Q, thanks for having me on.
Anytime. You got it. Our guy, Lloyd Vance. Vance's View. 5:43. Quick timeout.